Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, we have a very special return guest, and his name is Joey Coleman. Joey helps companies keep their customers and employees. As an award-winning speaker, he shares his first 100 days methodology for improving customer and employee retention with organizations around the world, for example, Whirlpool, Volkswagen Australia and Zappos. His Wall Street Journal #2 best-selling book, Never Lose a Customer Again, shows how to turn any sale into a lifelong customer. And his upcoming book, Never Lose an Employee Again, details a framework companies around the world can use to reduce turnover and increase employee engagement. So without further delay, sit back, plug your earphones in, and let's jump right into this conversation with Joey. Welcome back, Joey.
Oh, Unique, thank you so much for having me back. Thanks to everybody who's listening in as well. I'm super excited for our conversation.
All right, so let's start off with a little bit about your first book, Never Lose a Customer Again. For those of our listeners that may have just recently started listening to our podcast and unfortunately weren't able to tap into that awesome episode, could you tell us a little bit about that book, and then we can go into the new one that you recently launched?
Absolutely. So about 5 years ago, I wrote a book called Never Lose a Customer Again. And the premise of this book is that we spend so much time trying to find new customers that we forget to pay attention to the customers that we've already acquired, people who have already raised their hand and said, I want to do business with you. The premise of that book is based on some staggering research that we both did and came across that showed that somewhere between 20 and 70% of new customers will decide to stop doing business with you before the 100-day anniversary of becoming a customer. So as quickly as you're bringing customers in the front door, they're running out the back door. And the book outlines a framework that's based on 20 plus years of my experience as a consultant and speaker and agency owner. And it outlines a framework for how do we navigate our customer through 8 phases of a journey where we're creating the kind of remarkable experiences that will keep them coming back for more.
Perfect. All right. So before we actually started the official recording, you and I were kind of having an informal discussion as it relates to employee experience, and your new book, Never Lose an Employee Again, really focuses on what are some strategies, what are some tools. You've provided us with a great framework as to how it is that organizations can keep talent that is, really impactful to the organization, and they won't leave, because at the end of the day, if the employees grow, the company grows. So can you tell us a little bit about this book? And then I have some more specific questions I want to ask you based on my own reading as well.
Sure. Well, I often think of customer experience and employee experience as being 2 sides of the same coin. We can't expect to have a remarkable experience for our customers if our employees aren't delivering that remarkable experience. And the way our employees deliver a remarkable experience is they have a context for what that is, and they have a framework for how to continue to deliver that to the people they serve. Interestingly enough, when I set out to write this book, I had that first 100 days research from my first book in mind. And when I went and looked at the parallels in the world of employee experience, I found that they were shockingly similar. That same significant percentage of people who leave as a new customer in the first 100 days was mirrored in the world of employees who start a new job and then quit that job before the 100-day anniversary. In fact, depending on which research you looked at, it was again somewhere between 20 and 70%. And these numbers, Unique, I found to be absolutely staggering. I think many organizations have felt the pain of an employee leaving, but very few organizations are paying attention to the speed at which employees are leaving and the myriad reasons why employees are leaving, so that we can hopefully develop frameworks and structures and philosophies and methodologies that will keep our employees engaged and retained for the long term.
Yes, and your book focuses on the phases that you should use to try and retain these employees. And those phases are assess, accept, affirm, activate, acclimate, accomplish, adopt, and advocate. So can you just give us maybe a brief summary on each of those and why it's relevant?
Absolutely. And I'll try to go through these quickly, Anik, because there are 8 of them, right? And
Yeah.
we could spend an entire podcast talking about any one of these phases. But for context, before I describe them, the reason they all start with the letter A is I wanted folks to kind of have this thought that if your employees felt you were succeeding in each of these 8 phases, it's like getting straight A's on your report card in school. You're doing a great job and you're worthy of continuing to be advanced, right? Because
Right.
you're delivering a great experience. So the first phase is the assess phase. This is when a prospective employee is trying to decide whether or not they want to come work with you. They're looking at your job descriptions, your want ads, the About Us page on your website, the careers page on your website. They're submitting an application. They're going through your interview process. They're sharing their resume. You're doing reference checks, all the things that lead up for an employer to decide whether or not they want to hire this specific person, and the time period where the potential employee is also assessing whether or not they want to join your enterprise. We then come to phase 2, the accept phase. In this phase, the employer extends an offer. And if we're lucky, that desired candidate accepts our offer. We then move to the affirm phase. Now, this phase occurs immediately after the new employee has decided to accept the job offer. And Unique, I'm sure all of your amazing customer experience experts are very familiar with the concept of buyer's remorse. What they may not be as familiar with is the concept of new hires remorse. It's the same thing as buyer's remorse. It's scientifically proven that this happens anytime someone accepts a job offer. They begin to doubt the decision they just made. And in the affirm stage, we need to reaffirm their choice to counterbalance that fear and doubt and uncertainty they're naturally feeling in their new hires remorse stage. We then come to phase 4, the activate phase. Now, Unique, of all the 8 phases, this is the only phase that is limited in its duration, and that day is the first official day on the job. What is it like when you come to work for that first day? And in the immortal words of country music legend Bonnie Raitt, have you given us something to talk about? Because every employee is going to go home that night to their spouse, their significant other, their children, their parents, their roommate, whoever it is in their life. And that loved one, the first question they're going to ask when they come through the door is, how was your first day at work?
True.
How are your employees going to answer that question? Have you created such a remarkable experience on that first day that they have something to talk about? We then come to the acclimate phase, phase 5. Now, the acclimate phase starts on the second day on the job and can last for weeks or even months as the new employee gets used to your way of doing business. They learn the various roles and responsibilities they're going to have. They understand better the requirements of what they're supposed to do. They understand the relationships with their coworkers and colleagues and how all those pieces fit together for them to be great at their job. They're also learning your tools and your cadence of communication and the chain of command and the various things of how your business operates. We need to hold our employees' hands while they acclimate to the job. And too many employers just kind of push the employee into the deep end of the swimming pool and say, well, just go ahead and swim instead of taking care of them and making sure they understand what's happening. We then come to phase 6, the accomplish phase. This is when the new employee achieves the goal they had when they originally decided to accept your job offer. See, every employee has a vision of what this new career will be like, whether that will be more responsibility, more autonomy, more opportunities to develop new skills. They have a vision of what they're hoping to accomplish. The challenge is most employers not only don't know what that vision is, but they're not paying attention to the employee's progress as they track towards achieving those goals. If we don't do that as organizations, we can't celebrate with our team members when they accomplish their goals. We then come to phase 7, the adopt phase. This is when the employee becomes loyal to you and only you. They're committed. They're not going to look for jobs elsewhere. They're not listening to those calls from headhunters or recruiters that want to hire them away. Almost every business on the planet desires adopters. But what's fascinating is very few businesses do anything to acknowledge when an employee becomes an adopter. We have a tendency to take those employees for granted,
True.
even though they are the lifeblood of our enterprise. And if, and only if, Unique, we've helped to hold our employees' hands through those first 7 phases, do we have the right, the privilege, the honor of having them transition to the 8th and final phase, the advocate phase, where our employee becomes a raving fan for us, singing our praises far and wide. They're going on Glassdoor and writing reviews. Anytime we have a new position open, they're recruiting their best colleagues, the people they've worked with in past, the smartest humans they know to come apply for this job because they know it's a great place to work and they want amazing people to work there with them. The way I always test with business owners who say to me, "Oh, Joey, a lot of our teammates are advocates. And, so many of our people are advocates." I'll say, "Great. Here's a little test to see if that's true or not. The last time you had an open position in your organization, what percentage of the candidates you interviewed were direct referrals from your existing team members?"
That's a very
What's
good
interesting
question.
what's interesting, Unique, is those people who were previously saying, "Oh, everyone's an advocate," kind of go, well, actually, no one. I'm like, well, then you really don't have as many advocates as you think you do.
Right.
So those are the 8 phases. And the last thing I'll say on this, Unique, is that when an employee is promoted, they go back to the beginning. They go back to that assess phase, trying to decide, is this a promotion I want? What am I going to do? Okay, I'll accept the promotion. Oh, should I have accepted the promotion? I liked my old job, but this new job, even though it maybe comes with more money or a better title, it also comes with a lot more responsibility and a new learning curve. And then we've got to hold their hand and acclimate them. And what happens is the longer an employee is with the organization, the more they cycle through these phases. Yet most organizations aren't paying attention to the fact that the employee is going back to the beginning. And we have an opportunity to re-engage and reconnect with them as they navigate through the 8 phases the next time.
Mm-hmm. All right. I love those phases. And I love that question that you asked. Like, that really puts them on the spot and makes them practically say, okay, do we really have advocates in this organization? Now, Joey, could you share with us what are some of your favorite things you've seen brands do to create the kind of culture that you're talking about where employees are advocates, especially in this remote driven world that we have? I mean, the pandemic and COVID has definitely changed how organizations are approaching their business models. Many of them are taking on a more hybrid approach. I know, for example, in Kingston, Jamaica here, you do have some forward-thinking organizations who genuinely recognize that their employees can still be just as productive or even more working from home. But then I find you have some dinosaurs who still believe people need to physically sit in traffic and go to work from 8 to 5. And, they just need to see the people in the office to know that they're doing the work. But, what are your thoughts on that?
Unique, you are so correct. There's still a lot of dinosaur era thinking going on in many organizations today, despite the fact that we have proven both statistically and across almost every industry on the planet that remote work is just as effective, if not more effective, than in-person work. In fact, most of the research and the studies show that when employees work from home, they are more productive, they are more engaged, they are happier, and they feel a stronger connection to the fact that they are able to balance their work with their life. Mm-hmm. So if your organization isn't actively pursuing, at the very least, hybrid, if not pure remote work, I can set a stopwatch for how much longer you're going to be in business. It's just the reality that the landscape has changed. If we were to roll the clock back and I were to say to you, Unique, you can still run your business, but you're not allowed to use the internet. Most businesses would be like, oh my God, how am I supposed to function?
True.
If I can, this is a fundamental aspect of business. Remote work work from home, non-centralized come to an office work, when we get about, I think, 10 years down the road, it's going to feel like saying to someone, you can't use the internet. Saying to someone you have to come to the office is going to be the equivalent of a shock to the system and a foolish statement as saying you have to run your business without using electricity or the internet or a phone. It's just the ship has sailed. This is over. Now, when you ask me, about my favorites, it's kind of a tough question, Unique, because there are over 50 case studies in the new book from all 7 continents. And so asking me to pick a favorite is kind of tough. But here's what I will tell you is a common thread, especially amongst the organizations that are recognizing the benefits of hybrid and or remote work. And that is that in an increasingly digital era, the smartest companies in the planet are making sure to invest in analog interactions to attach to and be compatible with their digital interactions. What do I mean by that? Well, if you've got everyone working remotely and you're not having that office water cooler time and you're not having everybody come to the same office, while it is beneficial for your productivity and your engagement and your employee happiness, they're still humans. So we need to find ways to build additional connection with them that transcends the digital sphere. So that could be sending gifts to their house. It could be hosting in-person events every once in a while, maybe, a group gathering twice a year. Most of the research shows that if you have a fully remote team, you should strive to get together in person at least twice per year with the whole team. Mm-hmm. But here's the secret on that, Unique. It's not about getting together in person to have meetings and to do work. It's about getting together to create connection. So one of the companies that I profile in the book is Lego Corporation, right? Most folks listening are familiar with Lego, the children's toy, or the adult toy in my case. I love building Lego. I was building Lego sets this weekend.
Wow.
And my 2 boys who are younger came up and they were like, Daddy, can we help build too? Mm-hmm. So to show you, I was building on my own and then they wanted to play and we included them and it was great fun. But Lego does something where every year they have a play day. Now, Lego's a company that makes toys. So, of course, they believe strongly in the concept of play.
Yeah.
And every year they shut down all of their offices globally for a full day, all their stores, all their corporate headquarters, all of their factories, and everyone comes together. And what do they do that day?
They play.
Play. That's all they do. They don't have team meetings. They don't talk about the vision of the future. They just play. And in interviews with Lego employees globally, when you ask them what one of their favorite kind of traditions or rituals within the organization, they say that the Lego Play Day is something they think about all year leading up to it. Humans are not that complicated. We like the idea of social interaction. We like the idea of play. We like the idea of getting to know people personally so we can have a personal and emotional connection with them, not just a work connection.
Yeah, I agree. That kind of dovetails nicely into my next question, Joey, because with your new book, Never Lose an Employee Again. And I find a lot of times when I talk to some of my clients, especially not necessarily those who are in an HR function, but even the business owners themselves, they will grapple or, struggle with the fact that if they're losing employees, they believe it's a lot of times monetary. And I have found that a lot of times when an employee has reached to the point where they're resolute in their decision to say, I want to leave this company and go somewhere else, even if they're offered more money, they still wouldn't stay. They'd still leave. So I believe that, a lot of them would look forward to more non-monetary benefits, like simple to the example you gave about Lego, a simple play day. It's something that people look forward to. It's a sense of community. You get to meet and connect with people. And to me, there's no dollar value that you can put on those types of experiences. So I guess my question is, do you agree with me?
Only 100% Unique. Only 100% do I agree with everything you just said. It's really fascinating. If we look at the research that has been done on why employees leave, The typical study on why employees leave is based on a sample set of somewhere between 200 and 500 respondents.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you know anything about statistics or anybody listening has experience with statistics, a sample set of 200 to 500 results is not nearly as robust as if that number were larger and arguably significantly larger. In doing the research for the book, we came across some studies that had been done by the Work Institute, where they interviewed 234,000 employees who were quitting their jobs and asked them, why are you quitting? Now, many business owners around the world will say, well, my employee quit because they got more money somewhere else, or someone's going to pay him more money somewhere else. They make it all about the dollars,
Mm-hmm.
all about the money. But the research doesn't show that to be true. Only 9% of employees globally quit for more money. So then that led me to wonder, what about the other 91%? Why are those people quitting? Why are they? And what we found, this research found from the Work Institute, was that the number one reason, the greatest reason given, 23% of the respondents, so almost 2.5 times the number of people quit for this other reason. And that reason was they didn't see a clear path forward for their career at that organization. They didn't know what their next job was going to be. So when we as employers, an employee comes in and they're like, oh, I'm going to leave. And we're like, oh, we'll pay you more. We'll give you more benefits. We'll give you a better title. These are not the things they're looking for. So it's kind of like we're offering them things that at this point in the game really don't matter as much. And it almost feels insulting because we're not listening to why they're leaving. Instead, we need to move the conversation forward. We need to have the conversation before they come to us saying, I want to quit, and have a conversation around what are your goals as an employee? We have goals for you as your employer, things we'd like you to do, but what are you hoping to accomplish in your life? Are you trying to get out of debt? Are you trying to be more fit? Are you trying to start a family? Are you trying to buy a house? Are you trying to take care of aging parents? Are you trying to go on vacation? What are the things that are goals? Are you trying to run a marathon? Like, what are your goals? What are the things you're hoping to achieve? And then as employers, we need to look for opportunities to support our people in those goals as well. See, for all too long, Unique, I think we've had this belief, we meaning most organizations globally, that, well, there's business and there's personal. And when you're at work, we just want you to focus on the business. Don't bring your personal life to work. But what's interesting is almost every employer on the planet expects you to think about work when you're not at work. They expect you to answer emails, to have your phone on you, to be, we need you to work a couple hours late, or, oh, if you're going on vacation, we might need you to do 1 or 2 calls. The business has no problem asking the employee to chip into their personal time to do business related work. But God forbid we ask the business to allow the employee to chip into their business time to do personal things. For some reason, we think that's offensive or improper. Humans are humans. I would posit this, Unique. The employer of choice in the future is going to be the employer who pays as much attention to what happens in their employee's life between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. as they do compared to what happens in that employee's life between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m.
Agreed. 100%, Joey. I am there with you.
I love it.
All right. Now, I know when we had done our last podcast interview, we had asked you some of our standard questions that we normally ask you. I don't know if any of those answers have changed, but we'd love to hear. So first one is, what is the one online resource, tool, website, or app that you absolutely can't live without in your business?
Well, since the last time we had a podcast was about 5 years ago, I must confess, Unique, I'm not 100% sure of all the specific answers I gave then. But the one online tool that I'm using right now that I find increases efficiency and productivity, but also makes for, I think, a pretty great experience is the online scheduling tool Calendly.
Oh, it's
And the
brilliant.
reason I love it because often, as I'm sure you do, I have folks saying to me, Joey, we'd like to arrange a time to connect. We want to have a call. We want to talk about a project. We want to talk about a future speech because I spend most of my days giving speeches. We want to interview you for a podcast, whatever it may be. When I can send them a link that allows them to see the days I'm available and it syncs up beautifully with my calendar, it makes everybody's life faster and more efficient and more seamless. There isn't the back and forth of, well, what about next Tuesday at 3? Oh, I can't do that. What about Thursday at 9? Nope, I can't do that. What about the following Tuesday? And it makes things work better. So I'm a big fan of Calendly.
All right, perfect. And then, can you also share with us maybe one or two books that you have read? Could be books that you read a long time ago, or even ones that you've read recently, but they have had a great impact on you.
Unique, I love you dearly, but this is a completely unfair question
Why?
because I love reading books. I try to read a book a week. There are so many wonderful, wonderful books out in the world that I absolutely love. So let me do that. Let me give you an example of a book that is in the customer experience space, because I know a lot of your listeners spend most of their time in the CX space. And then I'll give you one that's in the employee experience space,
That's
since that's
perfect.
what we've been talking about. All right. So, in terms of the customer experience, I absolutely loved the book Creating Superfans by Brittany Hodak. An amazing book. It's been out for just not even a year yet. It came out earlier this year in January of 2023. Fantastic book, incredibly well written. Brittany Hodak is very much an emerging, but also well established voice in the CX space. She's smart as a whip. She's got amazing stories. She's incredibly talented. If you're not paying attention to Brittany Hodak, and if you haven't read her book Creating Superfans, go check it out. You will not be disappointed.
All right.
All righty. Now, on the employee experience side, I would look to the book How to Work with Almost Anyone by Michael Bungay Stanier. Now, what I love about Michael's book is it helps us with very practical tools for creating better connection and better relationships with the people we work with. It's a fast read, but it's a powerful read. How to Work with Almost Anyone. Michael is smart as a whip. He's an amazing human being. He's been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and he just has a really tactical yet powerfully thoughtful premise in this book that we need to be spending more time investing in relationships we create with our colleagues and our coworkers, and really diving into the relationship side instead of just, oh, well, they work at the same place as I do, and so we have to interact with each other. He's about building the relationships. So How to Work with Almost Anyone by Michael Bungay Stanier is absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joy, for sharing those two books that are both in areas that we were talking about today, customer experience and employee experience by Brittany and Michael. We'll definitely have those in the show notes of this episode. Now, can you also share with us what's the one thing that's going on in your life right now that you're really excited about? Either something you're working on to develop yourself or your people.
Oh, there's so many. I'm a excitable guy, Unique. You probably pick up on that. Anybody who's listening to the conversation, there's so many things I'm excited about right now. I would say the thing that I am most focused on is getting the word out about this new book. I'm so excited about the response. The book debuted at number 5 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. There is clearly a need for employee experience enhancement globally, and just the chance that I get to speak at events, to do workshops for individuals individual companies to help them get better at both engaging and retaining their people has me incredibly excited. We're delving into exploring creating some customized workbooks that folks will be able to avail themselves of and purchase that are going to really bring the ideas in the book. I like to think the book stands alone by itself in that it gives you, as Gary Vaynerchuk would say, high picture strategy, but it also tackle on the ground thing you can do. One of the challenges of writing a book is that you can't fit everything you want into the book because otherwise the book would be 10,000 pages long. So I'm excited to create more tactical tools that people can use on an almost weekly basis. Like, what is the thing we're going to focus on making our employee experience better this week, and give people those kinds of ideas and suggestions so that we can make it more fun to go to work. We can create more play. We can have more excitement with the things we do.
Yeah. You mentioned something about Gary Vaynerchuk just now, but you chipped out for a bit. So could you repeat that part for me, please?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say Gary Vaynerchuk has this really interesting concept of dirt and clouds. This idea that we want things that are very tactical and practical that we can do down in the dirt, but we also want big picture strategy. We want things that are kind of in the clouds, kind of the 35,000 foot view. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I really tried to create in the book, which is there is strategy in the book, but there are also really tactical things you can do. One of the things I'm excited about is adding even more examples on the tactical side available as workbooks and downloads and things like that that people can access to continue to work at enhancing their employee experiences on an ongoing basis.
All right, perfect. Okay, so Joey, our listeners would have tapped into this episode and they are super excited, just as much as you are, and they want to connect with you online. Where can they find you online?
So the best places to find me are as follows. If you're looking for the book, it's in every format that you might like to consume a book in. So we have a hardcover version so you can take notes in the margin. We've got an ebook if you like to read on your Kindle or your Nook. And if you've liked the sound of my voice during this podcast, there's an audiobook that I narrate. So I'll actually read the book to you. The book's called Never Lose an Employee Again, and it's available wherever you like to get your books. In terms of finding me online, there are two great places. Number one, my website, joeycoleman.com. That's Joey, like a baby kangaroo or a 5-year-old, you know? Coleman, Coleman, joeycoleman.com. You can find videos there. You can sign up for bonuses associated with the book. I like to try to keep that regularly updated with fun resources for folks. The other place to find me from a social media point of view is on LinkedIn. I don't do a lot on social media, but I live over on LinkedIn if I'm doing anything on social media. So come to LinkedIn, send out a friend request. Would love to connect with folks there. And that's also where I try to post information on a regular basis about both employee experience and customer experience. So there's something in there for everyone.
All right, perfect. Now, Joey, before we wrap our episodes up, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to this quote? If for any reason you got derailed or demotivated, it kind of helps to get you back on track.
You know, that's an interesting question, Unique. I don't necessarily have a quote that I come to, but in those scenarios, I like to try to get very clear on what the situation is we're dealing with. Let me explain that a little bit, if I may. I used to be a criminal defense lawyer, right? And so my job used to be to keep the wrongfully accused out of prison, wow. Right? And if I misspoke, now I'm a full-time professional speaker, but in those days, speaking in the courtroom, if I misspoke, someone went to prison. And that usually meant they went to prison for a long time. So whenever I'm faced with a challenging situation, I ask myself two questions. Number one, did anyone die? In this scenario we're dealing with, is there a death that has happened? And thankfully, it's very rare that I would ever answer that question yes. Usually no one has died. This question is, did anyone go to prison without the possibility of parole in the future? Because if you go to prison without the possibility of parole, you've got a really big problem. If someone has died, you've got a really big problem. But if no one died and no one went to prison without the possibility for parole, you actually don't have that big of a problem. You've got a situation, you've got a circumstance, you've got something you maybe need to focus on or address. But I find that that criteria of evaluating the situation allows me to keep some perspective on how much I should be getting worked up or frustrated or angry about a scenario, and instead say, this could be a lot worse. This is a challenging time to move through, but the consequences aren't that terrible and irrevocable that we're not going to be okay on the other side.
I like it. I like it. I've asked this question to over 150 guests because we're approaching close to 200 episodes for this podcast. And it's amazing that most guests would give like maybe a motivational quote, not necessarily ask themselves a question. So it's interesting the perspective that you take, because then you're able, as you identified, to really recognize, is this really an issue that we need to be raising our blood pressure and losing our mind, or can we just, adjust our approach and decide, okay, we're going to tackle it this way. These are the steps we're going to take, and this is how we're going to approach it.
Yeah, that's definitely what I try to do, because I agree with you. There are very few things that we should be raising our blood pressure in a negative way.
Yeah.
If you're raising your blood pressure, excited, if your heart's beating faster because you're inspired, you're eager, you're in love, you're feeling those things, great. But if your heart rate is raising because of stress, because of worry, because of fear, I think there's an opportunity to approach the situation from a different perspective to kind of keep things a little more calm.
Yeah, agreed. All right, Joey, thank you so much for coming back on our podcast. We are like way over the time that we're supposed to go, but this conversation was so amazing. I mean, I could talk to you for ideally another half an hour, but in trying to keep in line with keeping people's attention. And I'm hoping that this episode was just as interesting for our listeners as it was for me, that they will tap into it, for the 30 odd minutes that we've been speaking for. But just want to express my greatest gratitude to you. And of course, congratulations again on your new book, Never Lose an Employee Again. I think it really will be a great compliment to your original book, Never Lose a Customer Again. You brought up some excellent points, really practical stuff that employees and employers across different parts of the world in different industries can definitely, think about. I hope everyone that listens to this episode will go and grab a copy of your book, as you mentioned, in whatever version they like to listen to it in, whether it be audio or, ebook or the physical book where they read. But it was really, really insightful. I love these types of conversations that get me excited. It doesn't even feel like I'm doing a podcast. It feels like I'm sitting down with a friend, having a coffee or a nice glass of lemonade and just, having a great conversation. And these types of conversations really fulfill my soul, makes me feel good inside. So I hope it was as fun for me as it was for you.
Oh, Unique, it absolutely was. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And thanks to everybody who listened in today. Hopefully you left with an idea or a perspective or just a different way of looking at your employee experiences that will allow you to be even more remarkable than you already are. Because I promise you're already amazing. And maybe you got an idea or two of how you can allow even more of that remarkableness to shine through.
Amazing. All right. Just want to remind our listeners that you can follow us on Twitter at NavigatingCX, and feel free to join our private Facebook group, Navigating the Customer Experience Community. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.